Hello, and welcome to The Coffee Table, a new show on the station here at Shoreview Heights, where we interview authors about their most iconic novels to get the director's cut, you could say, and what they think about some of the issues or themes found in their work. And what a better way to start the show off than with John Grissom. Welcome, John, and thank you for joining me today. Pleasure is all mine. Now, for the few listeners that may not know, you are the author of many books, and as of 2012, you sold more than 200 million copies. But the novel that I'm interested in today is your first one, A Time to Kill. John, could you tell us a little bit of history and how you've come to writing this novel? Certainly. Before I came about to writing, I had been practicing law for about 10 years or so in Mississippi, and became quite successful at it too. I've won many cases, but it was in 1984 where the biggest case came across me. However, I was only a bystander. Sitting in the witness box was a little girl in tears, and she's describing to the jury about how she had been brutally beaten and raped. And as terrible as it may be, this intrigued me to wonder, what would a father do in this situation? And thus, a story had been born. So this is a true story? I'd say it was inspired by a real-life event, which unfortunately can happen to anyone given the circumstances. I see. And once you wrote the novel, how hard was it to get it published? It wasn't easy. Many publishers rejected my story before Wynwood Press finally agreed to publish it for me. Do you think the reason that all those publishers rejected your novel was due to the racial nature of the story? That it was maybe a bit too controversial? That's a very good question. And although I'm sure there were many other reasons that had nothing to do with the content of the story, it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that it is quite a difficult piece of literature to swallow, and they may have feared that it wouldn't sell well. Why do you say that? What part of the novel is difficult to take in? Well, it's no doubt that most people would not want to read about any rape case, especially when it happens to an innocent little girl. More importantly, this novel was written in the late 80s in Mississippi, where racism was more prevalent than it is now. And to have an African American to prevail was an idea hard to sell at the time because it was not a favored conclusion to many local residents. See, I always thought that these kinds of novels were great because it really forces the reader to view certain scenarios and events from different time frames. In saying that, how do you think a trial such as the one shared in the novel would play out in today's justice system? Well, I'm a supporter of fair trial no matter what the case. I believe everyone deserves a fair chance at justice. However, it is human instinct to prejudge based on appearance, race, or even first impressions. And that's kind of a sub-theme I wanted to bring out in A Time to Kill, is that racial status did significantly alter the man's right for a fair trial. Having said that, do I think that we have a perfect justice system currently? Sadly, I think the answer is no, because we always find ways to prematurely judge without reason. In addition, with the help of very talented lawyers, the many guilty have walked free, and the wrongly accused get put behind bars. Well, that's unfortunate, and obviously something nobody wants to hear. We often think that society is always moving forward, yet I guess that's not always the case. Now, understanding the novel's timeline and setting, explain to us Carl's thought process. What caused him to go over the edge and taking the lives of those two young men that had raped his daughter? In order to understand what Carl was thinking, you need to put yourself in his shoes. Carl is a father, and it's safe to say that fathers will go to extreme lengths to protect their young. However, after hearing that his daughter was violated by those two men, Carl felt that he had failed to protect his daughter, and having been recalled by Jake Brigance that around a year before 4 white males raped an African-American girl and got away with it, Carl Lee took it upon himself to go to the country courthouse and open fire upon the two same men that had committed the crime in order to get some revenge, even if it meant that he would live behind bars for the rest of his life, or worse, being sentenced to death. Would you do the same if you were in Carl's position? Well, that's quite a difficult question to answer, and one I hope I never have to legitimately consider. However, for sake of argument, while I am a father of 2 beautiful children, I wouldn't go to the extent to say I would flat out murder the ones responsible for such a terrible crime. Carl had an ultimatum. Either let the hooligans get away with such an unspeakable crime scot-free, or risk his own life to avenge his daughter in order to get some form of justice. Of course, you all know how that turned out. In short, no, I would not kill in order to achieve some sort of redemption. You've kind of answered my next and final question here, but I'd like you to sort of emphasize your take on revenge a little more. Do two wrongs make a right? Me, personally, no. In reality, Carl Lee would have probably been executed for his actions, and rightfully so. He consciously took the lives of two men, which did more wrong than good. He believed that killing was the answer for their crime. Also, if you recall, the deaths of those men rebirthed a KKK community that was dormant at the time. It brewed a perfect storm that brought the whole town into mayhem. Eventually, the story did conclude on a high note, but had Brigance not given the heartfelt speech that had convinced the jury to think with their heart and not with their eyes, it would have been over very quickly for Carl Lee. Thank you, Mr. Grissom. I believe that's all the time we have on this show. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you for having me.